Hey friends, welcome back to Acre Homestead. We are in the kitchen today, having a very, very busy day. I've already been in the kitchen starting last night, and we did a bunch of mise en place and meal prep, and not meal prep necessarily, but we did some prep stuff. So I'm gonna bring you back to we did do meal prep. I'm gonna bring you back to yesterday and this morning while I wash up all of these onions, and you can kind of see what we've already been doing in the kitchen. And then we're gonna be back to start processing a ton of apples. We harvested all the apples from the other house, and today's the day that we are going to go ahead and make some different things for the freezer so we can have desserts all fall and winter long. We're gonna make one of them tonight for dinner. We're also gonna make some tomato soup and enjoy the tomato harvest that's in right now. It is the night before I want to make some tomato soup. September to me just means tomato soup. The tomatoes are coming in like crazy. It's starting to be a little bit cooler in the evenings, not cold or crisp by any means yet, but it's definitely calls for some soup, and that is what we're going to do today. And I'm going to show you how to make the easiest rustic loaf of bread you could ever want to make, and it's not sourdough. I don't know how to do sourdough. I wish I had the patience to keep a sourdough starter alive. I've tried many times, and just right now in my life, it's not practical. So I have found this recipe, and it's so easy, and anyone can make a rustic loaf of bread in just a matter of minutes. The full written recipe will be linked down below at scratchpantry.com. The only thing you need to do is put 1.5 cups of warm water into your bowl, 1/2 teaspoon of active dry yeast, 3.5 cups of flour, some salt, and mix it together. This is a no-knead bread recipe, so you don't have to knead it at all. You could see how it's kind of like a shaggy looking dough. We're going to set this on the counter, and it's going to rest here overnight, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours. It is the next morning, and I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 450 degrees, and I'm going to put my Dutch oven into the oven in order to preheat that as well. When I say no-knead bread recipe, that means you don't need to knead it. And one of the functions of kneading bread is to form gluten. I said it before, but gluten is 2 proteins in flour, and then in the presence of water, they combine and they form gluten, and it's what gives structure to bread. And when you're making something like pie pastry, you do not want a lot of structure. You want it to be flaky and fall apart. But when you're making a rustic loaf of bread like this, you want gluten formation. And so there's 2 ways you can speed up the process, or there's one way you can speed up the process of gluten formation is by kneading bread. And what it does is it forces those 2 proteins together in the presence of water. But the beauty of this recipe is the gluten formation happens just by a matter of time, because the dough rests for 12 to 18 hours, and that just gives the flour enough time to hydrate and the gluten forms. So to form the dough, you could see how easy that was. I just turned it out upside down. There was a little bit of dryness on the top, but no worries. You fold that in on itself, and you kind of pinch the bread together, and then we put it in this bowl, and we're going to cover it and let it rest and rise for another 30 or so minutes while our oven preheats. So now that I have that going, I'm going to go down into my basement and do a little grocery shopping, because we are going to make tomato soup to go along with our bread today. And I need a bunch of onions in order to caramelize those for the tomato soup. And I also want to process a bunch of these onions because they aren't storage onions, and they're not going to last a long time down in my basement just like this. So I'm going to grab quite a few of them, and since I'm going to process some, I might as well process a lot of them. I also grabbed one of our preserves in case we put that on our grilled cheese. That's a fig balsamic onion preserve that is incredible. And I also grabbed 2 heads of garlic. I end up later going down and grabbing about 6 or 8 heads of garlic because we need garlic for today, but we also need garlic for some canning that we're going to be doing coming up, and I figured if I'm going to peel garlic, I might as well peel a bunch of it. So now that we have all of our groceries upstairs from downstairs, we're going to go ahead and cut off the ends of our onions, and I'm going to peel them, and I'm going to compost these peels because I harvested these peels when it was moist. The soil has really clung onto it, so normally I save my onion peels and I make broth out of it, but These ones are just going to be composted, and that's just fine. My feet and my hips have started to hurt, and so I know I'm going to be in the kitchen for a long time. So I ended up doing most of this processing sitting down, and that is just the phase of life I am in right now. So we got all of those onions peeled, and I'm really excited about that. There are a few more downstairs, but I will do those a different day. And now that the dough has rested for 30 minutes, it's time to go ahead and put the dough in this cast iron. Now, when you do this, it is extremely important to leave your pot holder on the top of your lid because that is hot, and you want to remember that's hot. You don't want to accidentally grab the lid of that cast iron. You put your bread in it, you put the lid on, and you put it back in the oven for 30 minutes. And now we have all these onions done. I did spill, and I did this twice actually, and that is just the nature of the way that I do things around here. This is not a perfect kitchen. This is a real life kitchen, and I tend to make a lot of messes. But I do try to clean up my messes as I go so that when we are done with a day like today, it is less overwhelming and I don't feel as overwhelmed, I guess. And so I'm just sweeping up our mess here. And this is what the bread looks like. Now, this oven is a propane oven, and I'm getting used to a propane oven. I definitely feel like this oven runs a lot hotter than my previous oven. And so normally I would let this cook for another 10 minutes. So normally this bread cooks for about 45 minutes, but it was done after 30 minutes. I like to tap on the bottom and it should sound kind of hollow. And that is our bread. It probably took me less than 5 minutes. It probably took 5 full minutes of actual working on this bread to make it happen. I want that loaf to be a little bit softer. So what I'm going to do is cover it in a towel while it cools, and that will make the outside crust just a little bit softer. That is a trick you can do with any homemade bread, even sandwich bread. If you want the crust of the sandwich bread to be a little bit softer, if you just throw a towel over it while it's resting, it will make it soft. Not soggy, just soft. So you can see that I did grab 8 or so heads of garlic, and I found it really helps if you just take the whole head of garlic and smash it on your cutting board, and then you can smash each individual clove, and that really helped peel this garlic. I'm really wanting at some point to do a massive garlic peeling party and maybe ask some people to come over if they want and help, and then I can share in the abundance, because I would love to have just a massive amount of pre-peeled garlic in the freezer. I think that would make my life a lot easier moving into the fall and winter, but that is going to be a project for a different day. And for now, we have one container that we'll be able to use those garlic cloves in the canning recipe we are going to be doing probably in the next day or two, which is going to be a ton of salsa verde. Now I have these beautiful yellow squash that we harvested together, and this one and one other one got a little bit too big. So I am going to remove some of the seeds and the inner pulp. What happens when they get a little too big is the seeds get a little bit big, and then this is just really, really watery, and it doesn't really add a bunch of yumminess to your foods. So I just cut that out, and the chickens are going to enjoy that. And then we are going to put this in the freeze dryer. Friends, freeze-dried shredded zucchini is probably one of my new favorite things that I've done this year. I've already used half of what we've made together. I put it in pasta sauces. I put it in just almost everything. Anything you want to thicken something up, you just throw a handful of shredded zucchini and you have that thickening agent, and it's lovely. This is the celery we pre-chopped, and we are putting this in a jar, and I don't know if I like this yet or not. This is a new thing to me, so we are going to see how well we like this freeze-dried celery. I'm thinking this is going to be really convenient for things like chicken pot pie and chicken soup. It's already pre-chopped, pre-washed. All I have to do is add it to broth and rehydrate it, but I will let you know how I like it. Now, if you are interested in a freeze dryer, I can link the one I have down in the description box. I have a medium one. If I was to get a freeze dryer again, I would have waited just a little bit and got the large, because I do love using this thing and it is already a pretty big investment. So if I'm going to run it, I wish that I had the larger capacity, because I find myself using it a lot. My goal is to try to have it going at least every day. We are now gonna head back to present time and get going on all the apples and soup. Even though it's still early in the day, I'm gonna get dinner going so I don't have to think about it later. And when we're ready to eat, it will be ready for us. So we put some olive oil in our pot. And we're gonna get our onions caramelizing. The key to this tomato soup is caramelized onions. You want these onions super, super sweet. Now we are gonna blend this soup up so the onions don't have to be perfectly diced or chopped, but I find that caramelizing onions goes faster when they're chopped a little bit smaller. So that's why I took the time to chop them a little bit smaller. Now we're gonna add a little bit of salt to help speed up the process. And we're gonna get going on our apples. This is our box of apples. We need to get to them because some of them do have some bug bites on them, and those will go bad from the inside out if I don't process them. What I've done is I have a bowl of just water here that I filled up. I'm gonna add a little bit of lemon juice so that we don't have our apples turn brown on us while we process them. I have 3 plans for these apples. The first thing we're gonna do is slice them up and get them prepared for pies, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna do that so we can have fresh pies all fall and winter and crisps. And then I also want to make some infused, I don't know if I'm gonna do like brandy, like apple cinnamon brandy, or whiskey or rum. I'm not exactly sure yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and pick out the apples that don't have any bug damage. And I'm not gonna do that at first. I'm just gonna, as I'm processing, I'm gonna say, okay, this apple, there's no bug holes in it, and we can use this for the infusion, versus ones that have a bug hole, like right here. I know a little bug got in there, so I bet the majority of this apple is just fine, totally usable, but there is gonna be some areas that we need to cut off. I don't have any vodka or brandy or whiskey in my house right now, so I need to buy that. So I'm gonna set these ones aside that I know are gonna stay fresh longer, because the ones that have bug damage can go bad from the inside out. So I want to make sure that we have some good apples to infuse, and we use up the apples that need to be used up right away today. I also put a cookie sheet next to my slicer, corer, and peeler. So we're going to use this to slice, core, and peel all of our apples. I put this here so that the peels can end up here and we can give these to the chickens. So this is, I have 2 of these. I have a suction one and I have one that attaches to the counter, but we're gonna try using this one first today, and we might have to switch to the other one. So let's start with that one big apple that we were looking at that has that bug hole in it, just so we can see what we're dealing with. I do try to make sure I get the stem inside that core. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get the one that attaches to the counter. So overall, this apple looks really good. We're gonna cut it in half so we can see. I'm gonna cut this part off. And you can see right there, that's where that bug bore into this apple. So that's where this apple's gonna go bad if we don't cut that off. Now we just take our perfect apple slices and we put them in our lemon water. Like that. And we're going to keep going until we have all these apples processed. I initially couldn't find the one of my apple core and peeler that attaches to the counter, and I quickly realized this one that suction cups is not going to work. 3 apples in and I wanted to pull my hair out, so I take some time and I look for my apple corer and peeler that attaches to the counter. Okay, I'm giving up on that one, and I'm going to grab my one that attaches to the counter. I thought I had that. Well, I can't seem to find it, which is a big bummer. Then I resolve myself to the fact that I'm gonna have to use this one, and I do another apple, and a light bulb goes off, and I'm pretty excited about that light bulb moment. And I forgot I was gifted this in my P.O. box. So let's go ahead and give this a try. It says it's a spiralizer, peeler, core, and slicer. So this might be just what we need in order to make this project happen. I've never used this before, so I have no idea how to use it. Should probably read the directions. I already put it on wrong, so it goes this way. I think I figured this thing out. So we put our fruit on here. I think I have the right attachment. Oh yeah, this is way better. All right, that's perfect. This is gonna make my life so much easier. I can't believe I forgot that I had this. This is a perfect apple, just a little bit that needs to be taken off. So apple goes on. Well, my life just got a whole lot easier. See, this one has a bad spot, no big deal. We'll just cut that off. This is why I want to take care of these apples as soon as possible, because if you let them sit too long, the damage just gets worse and worse. And you know, this apple is not really savable at this point. So this is going to be composted, given to the chickens, and we'll just move on from there. One of the really cool things about this KitchenAid attachment is I could walk around and do other things in my kitchen while it was processing the apples versus the manual ones where I have to actually manually sit there and crank it in order for it to process the apples. And so that was really nice. I really enjoyed that aspect of using the KitchenAid one. And I want to take a minute and just thank the person that sent me this KitchenAid attachment. And I also want to thank every single one of you who show up and watch my videos, like my videos, and comment on my videos. You all are so generous with your kind words and encouragement to me, and the amount of information I learned from you all in the comment section is just really one of the best benefits of this YouTube community. I want to let you know that I don't take you for granted, and I appreciate you, and I just want to say a big thank you for being you and being here and showing up. I am running out of space in this bowl, so we're gonna go ahead and get some pies started to be made, because I think this is enough for probably 3 pies, and that's how many pie pans I have. So we're gonna start with that. I'm gonna drain the lemon juice out of here, and we're gonna use this bowl to make our pie with. I wanna try to get as much liquid out as possible. Let's check the bottom. It looks pretty dry at the bottom here, so let's go ahead and make the pie filling. I want to show you one thing I did, and I think I'm really happy about this decision. This was actually a recommendation from a bunch of you all when I organized the kitchen to begin with. I switched my baking goods onto this island area here. So instead of having to get all my baking stuff out of this cupboard every time I want to bake something, and put it up on the counter here, I just put my baking supplies in here. We have brown sugar, which I need to make more of, white flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, yeast, whole wheat flour, oats, chocolate chips, cinnamon, and cocoa powder. So I think this is going to work a lot better for me long term. So I really appreciate everybody's recommendations on that. And I keep my measuring spoons in my containers, so it's going to be really easy. So this is, I think, the equivalent of enough filling for 3 pies. So I'm gonna add 1 cup of flour in here, and then we'll go from there to see how it looks. I have my white sugar here, and we're gonna add, let's see, so probably 1 cup per pie, so we'll add 3 cups. This is a 1/2 cup measure. Maybe let's do 2.5 cups because these apples are pretty sweet. I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. I also have fresh nutmeg here. If you guys have ever used fresh nutmeg, you know it's the best. I'm probably gonna use half of one of these nutmegs. Fresh nutmeg can be kind of expensive, but I think it's worth it. It's one of those spices that it just tastes completely different fresh versus pre-ground. And Josh and I went on our honeymoon to Jamaica. We were on this tour of this coffee farm because I love going on farm tours even when I'm overseas. And so we went to a coffee farm, and there was this man and he was selling these pod looking things for $1, 5 for $1. And it was fresh nutmeg, and it was still in its shell, so it didn't look like nutmeg. It was super cool. I didn't even know how nutmeg grew. And I bought only 1, and I really, really regret it. Josh was a little nervous bringing it back into the United States, but it was the best nutmeg I've ever had. And every time I think about that, I'm like, man, I wish I had bought like 20 packs or something, because they were $1 for 5. That is a steal. I think I keep saying Josh and I have been married for 7 years. It'll be 8 years. I just realized that last night we were talking about it actually. So Josh and I in February will be married for 8 years. One last thing we need to add, and that is of course salt. I'm gonna get in there with my hands and mix this up. Trying not to break the apples as much as possible. Our pie filling is all mixed up. Let me show you how this gets really cool. I saw this online. I did not come up with this idea on my own. I don't remember where I saw it for the first time. Let's see. Oh shoot. I only have 2 pie plates because one of ours is in the fridge with that tomato pie. So let's see how much we can fit in these 2 pie plates. I might have to wash that pie plate out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our 2 pie plates, we're gonna put a piece of parchment paper in the plate. Then we're gonna fill it up with our pie filling. I like really full apple pies because the apples cook down a lot, especially when they're cut this thin. Okay, so that's 1. I'm gonna do the same thing here. I just washed out my 3rd pie plate, and I did have to cut about 4 more apples to make enough for this 3rd pie. And we're gonna put these apples in here. I did taste the filling and it's perfectly sweet. I think we got the sugar ratio perfect there. And there is some liquid. I'm gonna try not to get as much of that liquid into the pie as possible, just so that when we go to bake the pie, we don't have soggy pie. This is where it gets a little bit fun. All we're gonna do is fold our parchment paper over this pie. I'm gonna tuck it in so it stays. I know you can can pie fillings, but when I look at the texture of canned pie fillings, the texture seems a little bit gloopy to me. I don't know if that's the proper term. So I've never really had the desire to do that. So I'm excited of finding this way to do it because I think that it's a good alternative to jarring up your pie filling. Now I'm gonna throw these in the freezer, and then once they're frozen, I can take them out of the pie plate. The only reason I'm keeping them in the pie plate is to keep the pie plate shape, and then I'll put them in a freezer bag, and now I have the fillings for 3 pies. This could be for Thanksgiving, Christmas, a cold night, we want a warm apple pie. All I have to do is roll out a crust, buy a crust, and I can bake this pie. So these are going in the freezer, and life just got a little bit easier come this fall and winter. Now that we have those in the freezer, we're gonna get going on the next apple project. I just got out some more Pyrex dishes, and we're gonna make a dessert tonight with some of these apples and one to bring to a friend. I'm actually bringing dinner to a friend tonight because she had surgery last week. So before we get going on more apples though, the onions are ready for the next step for the soup. These have been caramelizing away and they have a nice, beautiful color to them. I have all these tomatoes over here, so I'm gonna collect some ripe tomatoes and we're gonna make soup out of these tomatoes from the garden. But before I grab those tomatoes, I'm gonna add just a couple cloves of garlic in here. I'm gonna leave them whole because we're gonna blend this soup up. I'm just throwing these tomatoes in here. I'm going to go through and just cut some of these in half just so they start to break down a little bit faster. I just went through the whole box of apples, and these apples right here are the ones we're going to save to make our apple brandy or whiskey or vodka. So I'm going to throw these in the inside fridge so I don't accidentally peel them for the next recipe. I did get this bowl rinsed out with some fresh lemon water so we can peel these and get these right into the lemon water. I don't know if it's going to be brandy that we're going to infuse yet or vodka or maybe both. I keep saying that, so maybe that's what it is. I'm going to get these in these produce bags, and I am going to, when I drop off dinner for my friend, I'll pick some of that up, and then tomorrow we can do that project. The next project we're gonna do is we're gonna make 4 crisps, I think. We're gonna make 3 of them in this size, 1 for Josh and I that I'm gonna cook tonight, 1 for my friend here, and then I'm gonna put 1 of these 9x9s in the freezer, and then I'm gonna do a 9x13 in the freezer. This is gonna be more for if I need to bring dessert to a family event, or if I have people over and I want a really quick dessert, I'll pull this out and bake it. I'm not sure if I have enough apples here for this. So unlike the apple pie with the crisps, we're gonna make the entire recipe. So when we go to bake it, there won't have to be anything done to it. It will already be done. A little bit more water in here. I'm gonna go strain out. I think this was the perfect amount of apples for this. I'm not going to put very much sugar on these because there will be a sweet streusel topping. So maybe a 1/4 cup for these little ones. And then we need to put a little bit of flour so that they thicken up. You could use tapioca starch or cornstarch. You need this to be gluten-free. A little bit of nutmeg on each one. Cinnamon. Now we mix them up. The way my mom always makes her crisp topping is 1 part butter, 1 part flour, 1 part oats, and 1 part brown sugar. So that's what we're gonna do today. So we have our butter. I'm loving this setup here. This is making my life so much easier. And then I'm out of brown sugar, so I need to make more of that. So we'll do that in just a minute. We'll add our cinnamon first. So to make brown sugar, you just need white sugar. This is raw organic cane sugar, that's why it's a little bit brown. And we're gonna add about a teaspoon per cup of just blackstrap molasses. Let's start with that. And we'll mix that together, and that is brown sugar. So that's how easy it is to make brown sugar. While this has been mixing, I've been prepping apples to make some applesauce, so I'll show you that in a minute, but we'll finish this crisp first. I made way more brown sugar today than we need for this recipe because I wanted extra to put in here because we are out of brown sugar. So this is a half cup, so we need 6 of these. You will never go back to store-bought brown sugar once you start making your own because the freshness and flavor is just so incredible. Now we have enough for other recipes. So now I'm going to get in here with my hands and we're going to mix all this topping together. Figured this will be just the easiest way to do it. Now we're going to take our crumble topping and we're going to crumble it on top of each one of these crisps. I may have made a little bit too much. I'm not sure yet, but the crisp is the best part. So we'll see. If we made too much, I'll make one more dessert. I'll make a hybrid crisp pie, but we'll just have to see how it goes. There we go. We got 4 of them. Super happy with that. I think the amount of topping is perfect. 2 of them are going in the oven. I have the oven set for 350 degrees. I'm gonna wrap those 2 crisps that are going in the freezer with foil and saran wrap. I'll mark what they are, and you can bake those from frozen, no problem. Here is some applesauce we're gonna get going. I'm just peeling these with a peeler, and then I'm just chunking them pretty roughly, and we'll put them on the stove to bake, or not bake, to cook down. Some people, when they make their applesauce, they just leave the skins and the seeds in, and then they mill it after it cooks down. I have tried that, and that's not my personal preference. It's kind of a different texture or something, I don't know. So I take the time to peel it and core it, but just know that you don't have to do that. There's definitely an option out there where you can even cook it down. You would want to take the seeds out, this option. Take the seeds out, cut them up, and then with skins on and everything, cook your applesauce down and use an immersion blender. Some people do that as well. That's just not the way that I prefer it. I really, really like applesauce, and I have just found that this is my favorite way to do it. When I was younger, or not younger, but when I was like in high school, my mom and I used to make applesauce every year, and I would freeze it in little plastic containers. And those would be my ice packs when I would go to school for my lunches. And then by the time it was lunchtime, my applesauce would be like half thawed, and it was cold and so good. It was one of my favorite things to bring in my lunch. So now that I have half of this pot filled with apples, I'm gonna get this starting to cook down on the stove. I'm gonna add just a little bit of water so it doesn't burn. I'm gonna set this stove on a low setting here until it starts to cook, and then I will turn it down. And then our tomato soup is almost done. I'll show you what we have to do to finish it out after I get all those apples on the stove starting to cook down for us. I'm going to turn this down too. This is the last of the apples to be processed, so that is a huge accomplishment. I don't know if we're going to get all of them to fit in this pot, so we might have to wait until they cook down a little bit and we can add more. Yeah. I didn't want to get out my huge pot we made the enchilada sauce in because I thought that would be overkill. I typically don't put any sugar or cinnamon or anything in my applesauce. I just like it to be pure apple. Usually if you have a sweet enough apple, you don't really need sugar. So I'm gonna let this cook. Let's finish up our tomato soup. Our crisps are in the oven. Our bread is done. And I do have a disaster of a kitchen. We were doing pretty well, keeping it nice and clean, and this last little bit, it got a little messy. I'm not gonna worry about it. We're gonna finish the soup, and then I'll clean up at the end. One thing I have added to the soup was quite a bit of basil, salt, and pepper. And we're gonna add the last 2 ingredients. This is what it's looking like currently, but there are quite a bit of chunks in it. Let me show you the chunks actually. And I like a smooth tomato soup. I want to add cream, and the best way to do that is in the blender so you can emulsify it. Let's bring this over here so we don't burn ourselves. Sometimes tomato soup needs a little bit of sugar, but I like to sweeten it with cream first, taste it, and then see if it needs sugar. Sometimes dairy products will want to turn into cheese when you put them in something like a tomato soup because there is acid in the tomato soup, and that's how you make some kinds of cheese. But if you emulsify it in the blender, you help prevent that from happening. There's our dinner. So the only other ingredient we'd add to this would be a little bit of sugar and then adjust the seasonings. But let's try this and see how it is. So good. So good. But I do think it needs a little bit more pepper. I am out of pepper, so my mother-in-law stopped by and dropped off some pepper for me. I pick up my Azure order tomorrow, I think. Add a little bit more pepper. And I think a little bit more salt. And I think that's all it's gonna need. So good. Perfect summer dish. Except for the oil, the salt, and the pepper, this tomato soup was 100% homegrown, which is a huge accomplishment. And all those apples were homegrown. It's awesome. This is what my dreams are made of. I'm just cleaning up, and I think our crisps are done. So we're gonna get these out of the oven. We got a lot done today. How productive was that? Dinner's done. Applesauce is cooking away. We got 3 pie fillings, a ton of prep for tomorrow when we got a bunch of canning we're gonna do. Some crisps, some for tonight, some for later this fall and winter. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go pick up some ice cream to bring to my friend, and I'm gonna go bring her her dinner. I'm gonna go get some things to infuse those apples with. I'm not sure exactly what that's gonna be. And believe it or not, I am out of canning jars. Not completely out, I have canning jars, but not enough of the size that I need for the projects that we have coming up. Normally I buy 90% of my jars at Goodwill. And so I'm gonna run to Goodwill and see if I can find any jars. If I can't, I will run to my local store and pick some up. In my area, canning jars have not been an issue being able to source this year, thankfully. Unlike the last 2 years, they were extremely difficult. I have this on low. I will turn this off before we go so that we don't have to worry about burning. And then I probably will turn, I don't know, I was planning on making some really fancy grilled cheeses, but I don't know if I have that in me tonight with that bread. So we might just have some really delicious tomato soup with some really delicious bread, and then I can turn the leftovers into grilled cheese sandwiches the next week. Now, by putting that towel over the top of this when it cooled, it makes it so that it's nice and soft. It still has some crunch to it, and it's definitely like an artisan loaf. It's so beautiful. I love this bread. Maybe one day I'll get into sourdough, but for now, this is a fantastic, delicious bread that you can make, and you don't have to worry about keeping a sourdough starter alive. Thank you for hanging out with me today on this very busy day we had on the homestead. This is the height of food preservation season, and I love it. It's a lot of work, but the fruits of your labor definitely pay off come fall and winter when you have a lot of prepped dishes and a lot of prepped chopped vegetables ready to go. So it just makes throwing dinners together a whole lot easier, especially homemade dinners. If you guys want to watch more of my videos, I can put some videos here you can go enjoy between now and my next upload. If you're new, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you around. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.